Let's look across the ledger at Joe Biden. We mentioned his approval rating. I guess it ticked up 2 points, but I think it's going to take more than that going forward. His numbers with young people, there's just a poll that came out today. I think it was a YouGov one that said they're pretty good, but not in the numbers that it was in 2020. A lot of those people seem to be going to vote for third party, maybe 5 or 10%. That could be a problem. Where are we in terms of this? Like, Joe Biden does not seem to have at times like the vim and vigor to go out and, sort of campaign from behind, although as a president, you don't need to go out, right? I mean, this has been a strategy. A lot of presidents are basically doing like a White House run and this and that. And, we haven't seen Donald Trump on the campaign trail in the way that we have in the past. And it's almost like people have forgotten who he is. But what is your sense of how this is going to shake out? I mean, the biggest thing, it seems to be some of those third party things. And there was a story today where the no labels people are trying to sort of come up with a strategy where they would get into some type of coalition government if they take enough electoral college votes. And I should also say, for whatever reason, Joe Manchin came out with a student debt legislation that really just fixes the website so that you can see your, how much you owe. But, that's the kind of move that, so what is your sense on this?
Well, I'm gonna inject a little hopium here at the end of the year because I feel like we need it. There's an awful lot of bad news on this particular subject, or at least sort of doom and gloom on it. And so I'm gonna take the opposite tack. I agree with you absolutely, and I do think just getting out of the way, this third-party threat is the most important thing. It's the most important impediment to Joe Biden's chances. And it's not just no labels. It could also be RFK Jr. He, who knows? Jill Stein is out there, and you've got Cornel West too. And depending on where they all wind up on the ballot, that's a very dangerous place to be. And they're doing polling that shows that these third parties across the board do pull more from Biden than they pull from Trump. So, this idea on no labels, which seems to be thinking, well, we'll put up Joe Manchin and then that'll give Republicans a chance to vote for somebody other than Trump that they like. That's not how it works out. I mean, Trump is Trump, Republicans are Republicans. You're dealing with that party, and that's just what you have to do. So, there was a big meeting the other day, apparently, among a bunch of Democratic activist groups like Move On and actually Third Way, which has come out as being the big antagonist for no labels, which is kind of funny to me. But hey, I'll take it. It's fine if they want to put some energy toward that. And they were all saying that their main they believe it's a big grift, and it is. No labels is a big grift. They're taking tons and tons of money from people who, apparently have money to burn. But they said in this meeting, apparently, I think this was reported in Semaphore, that they're going to the candidates, the potential candidates like Liz Cheney or Manchin or any of the others, and saying, look, don't do this. You're gonna get Trump elected. Do not run, third party. And in fact, they got a quote from somebody who was apparently on the inside of the Manchin, his, insider group, saying that he wasn't going to do it. They came out afterwards and said, oh, he hasn't made any decisions. Right. But,
and Cheney was just saying that she was just saying that to sell her books. Now that her book is on the top, she's not. I mean, she's not.
And what good would that do? I mean, it's like what Republican?
Absurd.
They're not going to vote for her. No. So what? And anything, it might hurt Biden. I mean, I could see some little old ladies going, oh well, I like that Liz Cheney. What a nice girl. I'm voting for her. So that it's not going to help. So in any case, there is a lot of activity on this, and people are definitely worried about it. So just getting that out of the way. I honestly think that when people start looking at the way Donald Trump is campaigning, and I see no reason to believe that he's going to change, he's nuttier than he was before. He's always been nuts. We know that. We all watched him, tell people to drink bleach and what have you. But I do think that this new authoritarian, let's say it, Nazi, Hitler-esque, fascist rhetoric of his, I do think I think it has
Hitler copied me. I came up with the whole thing myself.
I haven't even read
He
Mein
copied
Kampf.
me. I never read Mein Kampf.
Which is funny because he's
And you know
never
what?
read anything, so
Right,
doesn't
of
really
course.
say too much.
I believe it. Yeah, I totally believe he hasn't read Mein Kampf because he has
Yeah.
never read anything. But I do believe that he's a natural-born fascist. He doesn't need to read it. He lives it. It's in his DNA, and he'll say it's in his DNA because he loves to talk about how he loves his good German blood. So this is the guy that we're talking about, and I do think, as what you said, Sam, that people have forgotten, who he is. And I think when they're reminded of it, it's going to make a difference. So that's Trump. And he is going to be the nominee. I think we can all agree. It would take, he's got to fall over on the golf course or at the omelet bar at Mar-a-Lago and have a heart attack or something for him not to be the nominee. And that's really what Nikki and Ron DeSantis have been playing with. But I do think these economic numbers, I think they're starting to make a difference. You're seeing rises in consumer confidence, interest rates are coming down, inflation is coming down, mortgage rates have dropped substantially, and that's all this stuff. And then with the Fed,
Have mortgage rates dropped?
Yes,
recently?
just happened this week. Yeah,
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay. And that must be in anticipation
Yeah, right.
of the Fed
Right.
dropping rates going forward.
Exactly. And then you've got rents, also another big story, that rents have stabilized and are starting to come down. You're starting to see an economy that is improving in a way. Now, I'm older than you guys both, and I went through the early 80s when this whole thing, when we went through the Ronald Reagan's first term. And I was an adult at that time. So, I remember this, and it was like you can't imagine the horror of what the economy was like then. I mean, they called it the misery index. It was high unemployment and high inflation all at the same time. It was horrible, which is something we were anticipating that was going to happen in this case when the Fed was raising interest rates, and we thought, oh my God, we're going to have a recession, unemployment's going to happen. Didn't happen. So it looks like we've got a soft landing. But in the 80s, going into that election in 1984, which I followed very, very closely, and everybody assumed that Reagan was dead. They really did. And it was because it was so bad. I mean, the pain of what, and Reagan he had taken out the flight, the
FAA,
PATCO, the union, the union, the flight. What are they called?
The
air traffic controllers. Yeah, union. And he had taken that out. I mean, everybody was just, it was like, whoa, this is terrible. And then suddenly, as people started to feel it, things came around, and of course they had the famous ad, Morning in America. And it was a landslide victory. I'm not comparing it. We're in a different time. Donald Trump is a very different kind of person. We're dealing with, a Democrat in the White House instead of a Republican, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm just saying that I have seen it happen where you can go from this really miserable doom and gloom feeling about the economy. And of course, we have the hangover from the pandemic, which I think has really been affecting people's, vibe, if you want to call it that. I sense that that's changing. So that's my hopium, is that I think that between seeing Donald Trump and what he is and the economy improving, I think that Biden doesn't have to do a whole lot. It's like you say, he can do like a more Rose Garden strategy, get out there and, make speeches and have other people out there doing the hardcore anti-Trump campaigning, which I hope that the Democrats get on. They need to do that. And I think that he'll eke out a victory. I think, all things being equal, I think he should. Now, a lot depends on, I'm very worried about what's happening with the Israel and Gaza situation, because that's very volatile, and everybody, even the war hawks in the Congress, are now saying, come on, this is ridiculous. You got to do something. So that could, you never know how events are going to affect things, but just from my perspective, I think he's in better shape than most people think. That's my feeling.
Do you think that he needs to start, though, running with a message now a little bit, even though like the primary process hasn't even begun?
Absolutely.
Because I've been bandying this idea about in my head about how Biden really, because like, yes, rental prices are beginning to tick down, but homelessness went up 12%. And I think it's one of the highest homelessness rates that we've seen in years.
There's a housing shortage.
There's
I mean,
a
there
housing-
just simply is.
Yeah.
We haven't built
Massive
housing. This has
housing
been building for really since the financial crisis.
So my idea is I really think Biden should run on a national housing initiative on rental prices, on building more housing, potentially repealing the Faircloth Amendment in order to get more subsidized housing built, although that's, I'm sure, a little bit too liberal for his taste. But I mean, that's the kind of thing that could really appeal to younger voters who are feeling pretty despondent about the student debt promise kind of falling through. And part of that's the Supreme Court. Part of that, I think, is a failed strategy of Biden and not going more aggressively on that front. But housing is the other thing in rental prices that affect, my generation. What do you think of that idea as something that he could emphasize a bit?
I think it's a fabulous idea. I think it's absolutely a fabulous idea. That's one of the things that has, and it's not just young people. I mean, it's like everybody,
Right.
who are, I mean, if you're a homeowner and you're old, if you're my age and, you've got a lot of equity in your house, things are looking pretty good, right? You can sell out and, to some speculator somewhere and you've got a nice tidy nest egg. But for anybody else, it's a problem across the board. So, I think it's a great idea. And it also would tie in perfectly with his emphasis on infrastructure, right? Because he's been, in fact, there is a lot of home building is way up just over the last 6 months. Suddenly we're starting to see housing really ticking up, new housing. And I notice here in this, because I live in the city, you guys live in the city, I'm sure you're noticing that there's a lot of building.
They've been building buildings here for like the past 10 years. It's been like
Our audience gets to hear the lovely noises outside of our office.
But that's been going on for a long time. I mean, it's really, we're talking about housing all across the country, maybe outside of different cities.